today. We're launching the largest left of Labour, working class and socialist electoral alternative this country has seen for 60 years.
Jill Kennett, formerly Labour councillor, removed from the Labour Party because of refusing to vote for the cuts. Having come to the conference today for TUSC, I really have found today quite inspiring, because although I'm still going to be Hull Red Labour for the time being, I see that TUSC offers an alternative that people are looking for.
Sisters and brothers, comrades and friends, can I formally welcome you to the TUSC 2015 conference. On May the 7th, 2015, there'll be millions of working class people in this country that'll be looking forward to the day, the chance to get rid of a Tory and Liberal Democrat coalition that's been responsible for a widening of gap between the rich and the rest in this country, freezing of public sector wages, cutting hundreds of thousands of jobs. Now, we, TUSC, were formed 5 years ago this month, co-founded by the late Bob Crow, then the General Secretary of the Transport Union, the RMT, because we don't accept that picture should be broadly the same, and we're going to do something about it. So today, we will be standing over 100 anti-austerity parliamentary candidates in every major town and city in the country.
This fall in living conditions of working people in the last 5 years has been the largest fall for over 100 years. But lo and behold, the richest 1,000 people have seen their wealth double in the same period to £519 billion. Wealth has been taken from the working class and handed over to the super rich. The rich have robbed us of the surplus value that we as workers produce. It is a robbery from our class into the pockets of the super rich.
I first became involved through my dad. He filled the forms in and paid me first year subscription to the Labour Party because he was a miner. That's what they believed in. Well, I stopped that direct debit when the Labour Party congratulated the Tories on selling Birmingham to G4S. Then I joined the Socialist Party. And can I say that's the best thing that I've ever done in my working life.
And I would echo what was said earlier about it's never been more hollow to say that if you don't vote for Labour, you'll get the Tories. Because Labour is finished in Scotland, dead in Scotland, it'll be wiped out in the polls. And that's not just a kickback, let's give them a bit of a kick in. You used to weigh the Labour vote in Scotland, they are finished. They stood with the Tories and they are finished in Scotland.
I had 21 years with the Labour Party. My father maintained pit wheels for years, and obviously we saw the strikes in the 80s, which my dad was a part of. And so it was a foregone conclusion that we would be members of the Labour Party and we would support our rugby team. That was the two things we had to do in our family. So I won the seat, and we won it on a no-cuts manifesto. We was in power a year, and then we started delivering all the cuts. I went to the leader of the council and told him that why we're delivering these cuts. We've got a manifesto out in Hull that we're fighting the cuts and that we have an alternative. You told us we had the alternative, I told the people in that ward we had an alternative. Please let me tell them what it is. However, it was aspirational. It wasn't actually anything that was said on the leaflet, it was just aspirational. And we're doing it with an heavy heart. We were suspended and then indefinitely suspended by the group and then by the Labour Party. And we was told that we'd probably just disappear. Unfortunately, Jill's not like that. And she said, no, we have to come back with vengeance and we have to start our own campaign against austerity and the cuts. And here we are now, we've formed Hull Red Labour, and we've been working with, I have to say, Mike Whale, who was the TUSC organiser with Paul Spooner in Hull, and we've worked together for 5 years. We haven't just been fighting the cuts in the last few years, we've been fighting since they started coming in, even before Labour left power. I mean, I worked for the NHS for 10 years and knew that it was Labour who privatised it. It wasn't the Tories. They opened the door for it. Labour also brought the bedroom tax into the private sector.
I won the seat under Labour. I won the second term under Labour. But during my second term, I've fallen out with the Labour Party. Why? Because I don't believe it was a party that I joined in the first place. I didn't join the party to tell my constituents that I'm closing down my schools and there isn't enough education to bring into the communities, and I certainly wasn't happy on not providing doctors' surgeries and local services within the ward. Certainly not happy in having to pay bedroom tax and council tax, and people struggling with benefits and being suspended and not having nothing to eat during the time of the suspensions. So I thought, this is my time to get out and this is my time to make a stand. The rest of the 53 Labour Party members in the city all thought, she's a goner, but I'm still here, loud and proud. Not only have I left my party single-handed, but I took one of my comrades with me almost at the same time. And since then, we're now formulating a TUSC party within our city and got 12 prospective councillors to stand this May.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm very proud to be representing the Socialist Party at this TUSC conference today. And in our view, this is a historic conference for TUSC. We were formed in 2010. We scored 41 candidates in seats across Britain back in 2010. And since that time, we've developed. I think we've scored 1,220 something candidates in elections across the country. We have won, as you heard in the last session, the cream of Britain's councillors, the anti-cuts councillors, to work with us in TUSC or under the banner of TUSC. But if what we've achieved so far has been our birth, then what we are attempting to do in these next elections is TUSC beginning to walk. It's a qualitative step forward. And Dave has already described, I think you all know, our aims to stand 1,000 council seats and over 100 in the general election. And that will make us the 6th biggest party in these elections, which will give us not fair coverage in the media, whatever they say, we'll have to fight for it, but will give us a bit more coverage in the media. And in the Socialist Party's view, it's vital that we do this. Yes, for the effect we can have in the election, for the people that we can reach through our campaigning. Yes, for the many more, thousands more we hope, people we can convince to become TUSC activists during the course of this election. But above all, we're doing this to lay down a marker to establish our banner for what is coming beyond the general election. Several speakers today have already talked about Greece and the elections that are taking place there tomorrow. But it's not just Greece. Things are changing in many countries. I'm sure many of you will have read about the new left party Podemos in Spain. I looked them up on Wikipedia. July 2014, they had 0 members, according to Wikipedia. By December 2014, they had 310,000 members. They're now topping the polls in Spain. That is an indication of a growing anti-austerity mood there. Closer to home, here in Scotland, Cheryl talked about it this morning. But no one can again say that working class people in Britain are apathetic. When we had the highest turnout since the introduction of universal suffrage, people since flooding into the yes parties in Scotland, showing that once people can see an effective means to fight austerity, then they're not apathetic, they're prepared to do it. Also close to home, we've got Ireland. The capitalist press in Ireland were describing the Irish people as sheeple until recently, because they were so apathetic, they just did whatever they were told, they never fought back. Now they're describing them as the mob, because they've risen up in this huge movement against the water charges in Ireland, which also has an electoral arm with the election of socialists, including the anti-austerity candidate Paul Murphy, elected as an MP, a member of the Socialist Party, at the end of last year. And there can be a tendency for us here in Britain to think, yeah, that's Southern Europe, that's Ireland, they're militant, nothing is ever going to change in Britain. But we think that would be completely wrong. Governments are nearly collapsing in Sweden. There's been a general strike in Belgium. Southern Europe is coming north and it's affecting us here in Britain as well. It's clear to everybody we are on the verge of a qualitative shift in politics in Britain. The old establishment parties are being undermined by their support for austerity. It is incredible that the Tories are not guaranteed to go down to defeat at the general election, given how hated they are for their policies. But of course we know, and as was described this morning, the only reason for that is Labour's endless mantra of me too, we're the same, where only 5 Labour MPs vote against institutionalising the next round of cuts 2 weeks ago in the Parliament. So as a result, we're going to have a general election where the Lib Dems will be annihilated and the other 2 major parties are likely to get below 65%. Because we have not yet created a mass voice for working class people here in Britain, people are going to protest in all kinds of directions. They will protest by staying at home and not voting. Some will protest by voting for UKIP, and that will certainly include angry right-wingers, ex-Tories, but it will also include some workers as well. That's clear from recent election results. UKIP mobilised voters with divisive, anti-immigrant, racist propaganda, which of course, as was pointed out in the last session, the other mainstream parties argue against by saying exactly the same thing, and the more UKIP says, the further they go in their racist propaganda. But in our view, that's not the only reason that people are voting for UKIP. The main reason, particularly for workers voting for UKIP, is because they see them as a means to kick the establishment parties. If you look at the views of UKIP voters on many issues, they're to the left not just of the leadership of UKIP, but of all of the establishment parties. So, for example, 78% of UKIP voters support renationalisation of the energy companies, 73% of them support renationalisation of the railways, a big majority oppose zero-hour contracts and so on. What that shows is that if we can build a party with a mass voice that genuinely represents working class people, then we can win many of those UKIP voters to such a party with a clear anti-racist programme. Not just UKIP, there are also people searching for a left alternative who we know are going to vote Green in these coming elections. I don't want to repeat the points, I don't have time, but while undoubtedly students see that the Greens stand for free education and they think, great, I'll vote Green, and their programme is to the left of the establishment parties, when push has come to shove, everywhere across the country where they've had councillors, they've been prepared to vote for cuts and to join coalitions with the establishment parties. And on a national basis, Natalie Bennett has said that they will be prepared to vote through Labour anti-cuts budgets if Labour wins the election. So what we are doing in TUSC is laying the basis for what's coming beyond the general election, where we're seeing an increased fragmentation of politics. The argument of the leaders of the affiliated trade unions who are still affiliated to the Labour Party, that it's a choice between Labour and oblivion. They're the only show in town. Events are increasingly proving that not to be true. The reality is, if Labour do manage to win the election, and they carry out austerity as they would, they could end up like PASOK, the equivalent of Labour in Greece, which is now virtually an ex-party. And other forces will fill the vacuum. But they can be the dangerous right-wing anti-immigrant forces of UKIP and others, or we can fight to create a genuine socialist alternative, and that is what we are preparing the ground for.